Don't even think about it. You already got into mommy's yarn today. Hey, Suki. So it's officially that time of the year, which means that we need to talk and swatch summer yarns. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Of course, it's your girl Erin. We have a guest speaker today, Suki. Honestly, she's been a very naughty girl today. I had all of my yarns laid out and ready to record today's video, and then I ran out of the house for literally 20 minutes to get my morning coffee, and I came back to a mess. Thankfully, I was able to salvage everything. I actually spent close to an hour just cutting yarns, trying to rewind everything because it was just so bad I couldn't leave it alone. But regardless, welcome to today's video. As you can tell, we've got some yarn laid out behind me. We're just gonna be talking shop today, talking summer fibers, summer wearables, and then believe it or not, your girl really took the time to record some swatches. I just feel that it's really important to see how the yarn's gonna work up, if you guys have any issues with it, what to expect. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the yarn review and the yarn swatches. But I do also want to say a huge thank you to Hobbii for sponsoring today's video. You guys had to see it coming. Y'all know Hobbii's like some of my favorite all-time yarn, and it's always for a really affordable price. So yeah, I should honestly just break out some of these yarns and get to talking about them. And I feel like I need to address the elephant in the room, which is the fact that I recently got my hair cut. Yeah, it looks a little bit different. I went to a new lady. I didn't like my cut at all. I'm not super happy with it. So thankfully I do have my new mesh skull cap. My new mesh skull cap pattern, which is currently being pattern tested. And honestly, this is like the perfect timing because I can just throw on these caps and cover up this haircut. So the very first yarn that I want to talk about is Hobbii's Seashell. I decided to pick it up in a few different shades. I really liked the color palette that they provided. It kind of reminds me of like coastal summer beach vibes, just very soft colors, but still with a ton of pigment. By far, this is one of my favorite new fibers for summer. The Seashell line is with cotton, viscose, and linen. Now, upon first feel, you can tell that there is a little bit of cotton and a little bit of linen in there, but to me, it feels rather slippery smooth. It's really, really gorgeous. And believe it or not, this also has a subtle sheen to it, so it's kind of like the perfect lightweight wearable. Now, I love cotton linen blends because they're extremely durable. You guys can hand wash these, throw them in the washer and dryer, and this bad boy is really gonna hold up long term. Now the Seashell line is labeled as a #2 fine weight fiber, and after kind of testing with it a little bit, I would kind of lean more on like a fingering to a sport weight. It is rather fine. So let me give you guys a little finger swatch of what to expect. You can really see the little bit of a shine or a sheen that this fiber has, and it feels very delicate on the fingers. Now, when it comes to the ply or the spun of this fiber, initially I thought that it was rather tight just sitting in the skein, but as I started to crochet with it, I noticed that it's more so on the loosely spun side. But surprisingly, when I was swatching it, the yarn didn't split at all. I didn't get caught up on any of my stitches. I didn't have to redo anything. It worked up like a dream. Your project's gonna have a lot of drape, a nice little flow to it. It's not gonna be super stiff, which is something that I look for personally when it comes to making wearables. Now, I know you guys are going to ask, having that linen in there traditionally makes yarns a little bit more stiff and a little bit like less flexible, but in my own personal opinion, this yarn does not feel stiff or rigid by any means. It more so feels crisp, but it's still super soft to the touch, and it has a lot of, I guess you could call it motion, a lot of motion in the ocean. Y'all could make so many things with this fiber, so I really do want to recommend this. So this is the cute little color palette that I picked out for the Seashell line. I wanted to test out the stitch definition of this fiber since it has a very high cotton and linen content, so I opted for this kind of like Trinity star stitch. Of course, there are so many ways to manipulate the fiber with the stitch and the hook that you're using, but to my surprise, the Seashell line created just the right amount of structure without it being too stiff or rigid. The yarn was super smooth to work with, and it felt really great against my hands. Of course, I had to perform a little stretch test, and to my disbelief, it had so much more wiggle room than I had imagined it would. This fiber could effortlessly be used for any type of garment. Now, for those of you who like a little bit more color, a little bit more pizzazz, we have another fiber. This is the Olivin I think it's French. I could be totally wrong. It could just be Olivin, but that doesn't sound right. I'm gonna say Olivin because it sounds much more Parisian, much more elegant. Now, as you can tell right off the bat, there's a ton more color with this line, so much more deeper, vibrant shades. We have a really interesting color palette that I chose, but I really wanted to highlight just all of the different colorways that this line does provide. So we've got this really gorgeous kind of like orangey peach shade. I almost said Tiffany blue, but this is like a navy blue. But for all those who like these softer colors, I also picked out this really gorgeous kind of like sour apple, but slightly sage green. This one is truly stunning. And then I have more of this like just packs a punch magenta, almost hot fuchsia. So with the Olivin line, it is a natural style fiber made with 50% cotton and 50% linen. The very first thing that I noticed about this fiber is that it is more of a dual toned colorway, which kind of creates a slightly marled effect. Now with this yarn, it's not a white and then a separate color. They do kind of match them very, very closely, so it's much more subtle, but having these kind of dual tones in the yarn is gonna make your project a little bit more dimensional. It's not gonna lie flat. There's gonna have a little bit more character, a little bit more pizzazz. So for those of you who really like working with solid color projects, this would be a really great option. This is also labeled as a #2 fine weight fiber, which I believe to be pretty accurate. Here it is across the finger, and now you can really see those two separate plies spun together to create kind of like that marled effect. My very first impression of this fiber is that it's not quite as touchably soft as the Seashell line. It's still nothing terrible. Honestly, it can kind of glide across my finger, but you do really notice that higher cotton and linen content. The Seashell does feel much more slippery and almost reminiscent of a silk fiber, while the Olivin is a little bit more textured upon first touch. Now, I wouldn't classify this as a scruffy fiber or a rough fiber, but you can definitely tell that there is a little bit more grip and not quite as much give as the previous fiber. But the good news with this fiber is that because we have the linen in there, it's really known for having a high stitch definition. Same thing with the cotton. It's still gonna be very lightweight and breathable. But if you guys have a pattern that has a really intricate kind of stitch pattern, this yarn is going to stand out and speak for itself. The other really good thing about linen that I've read is that it becomes a little bit more softer and less stiff, less rigid the more that you wear it and the more that you wash it. So although your project might not look the way that you want it to at first, if you continue to wash it, dry it, wear it, kind of stretch it out just a little bit, over time the linen yarn is really going to become something that has a little bit more drape, a little bit more flow to it, and something that is much softer upon touch. So the Olivin line in my eyes has a very high potential. Of course, I had to put this cotton linen blend to the stitch definition test, so I worked up a few rows with this like lacy pattern involving a wraparound stitch technique. Y'all know I'm only gonna give honest reviews here, so this is the tea. The yarn glided pretty smoothly over my hook, but the slight roughness of the fiber was noticeable in my hand, so I have to say that. I personally didn't experience any type of fiber burn or scratching against my fingers, but it wasn't necessarily the most comfortable yarn to work with in my hand. Now that being said, the overall outcome of my swatch was truly gorgeous. Stitches were easy to see and insert into, and the pattern really shines. The work didn't budge too much, but there was just a little tiny bit of give, which means that your project will stay pretty much true to size. I would recommend this fiber for accessories such as bags, home decor, or maybe even like amigurumi. If you were to make wearable garments out of this, I would choose a project that is more loose and flowy, kind of like a mesh or lacy cardigan, shawl. So essentially, my advice is to avoid tight-fitting clothing with this fiber. Now I'm gonna throw you guys for a little bit of a loop here because this is an unexpected favorite for summer, at least for me. So this next line is Hobie's Florence. Now at very first glance, it looks like a super tiny yarn. Like traditionally yarn does not come on these like little cones, but that's because this is a rather special fiber. So the Florence line is actually made with 100% flax linen. This is a fiber that I have never worked with before. As you can see, there's a very intense but gorgeous halo, and the flax linen also has this very noticeable shine to it as well. So right off of the bat, this is very eye-catching, but it is different because the 100% flax linen is not a soft fiber. Honestly, it's not super comfortable in the hand. You can really tell on first impression that this fiber is meant for a very specific project. Florence is also labeled as a number 3 lightweight or DK weight fiber, but after kind of testing around with it, I think it's more closely towards a sport weight. Now again, it does have that halo in there that I mentioned. So depending on the hook size that you use, it can work up a little bit thicker than what you're expecting. But before I go on, I really should mention that this type of fiber is not recommended at all for any type of garment or wearable that's gonna be very, very close to your skin. Personally, I would not choose to use this yarn for a sweater, a crop top, shorts, skirt, not even a scarf, not even mittens. This thing is very particular, but if you guys have been in the market kind of looking around to make yourself like a little cap, a little sun hat, a bucket hat, I would really highly recommend, because this thing, it's so stiff and so rigid that it's really gonna hold its shape. Whatever you make, it's kind of gonna stay that way forever. So hats are a really great option for this yarn, but the projects that will make this yarn stand out are anything that is like a home decor, anything for decoration, and also like some accessories. This type of yarn would be really, really great for like a tote bag and over the shoulder bag, just because it's not going to stretch out. It's not gonna wear down over time. It's really gonna hold its shape and its structure long term. So here's another close-up glance at Florence. Now, because it is a rather thin fiber, I think that this would perform immaculately if you were to double strand with it. Now again, this isn't gonna be very soft against your skin, so what you could do is double strand the flax linen, the Florence yarn, with something like a cotton yarn or even like a wool acrylic blend, and having that double strand in there is not only going to soften up your overall project, but it's still going to maintain that structure and that slight rigidity that we're looking for. So we don't want something that is like super dense and super stiff and has zero movement, because that's not fun at all. But again, by having this double stranded with like a wool and acrylic, or like a wool cotton acrylic blend, hopefully it's gonna make this much more wearable and a little bit more comfortable against our delicate skin. Now it's time for the swatch. I immediately could see and feel just how stiff this fiber is. I had a little bit of difficulty seeing my stitches, and I think that it was mostly due to the fluffy halo. I didn't really want my work to be super dense, so I opted for a 4mm and cast it on this like moss stitch pattern. For the stretch test, you guessed it, this bad boy cannot be phased. No amount of pulling or prying or pushing will get this yarn to budge. It is what it is, if you know what I'm saying. But now that I have a better feel for this yarn, I've been thinking about using this to make a sun hat. Kind of think horse racing derby attire, kind of vintage and fashionable. Now for the very last yarn review that I wanted to touch on, this is Hobie's upcycled alpaca blend. Now the alpaca blend is made with acrylic, alpaca, and wool. And I know you guys are already questioning yourselves, questioning me, Erin, why are you recommending a wool alpaca blend for a summer yarn review? And that is because I feel a fiber like this is a really great option for the transitional seasons, or even just like transitional times of the day. If you guys are anything like me, you're hot during the summer months, but at night when it starts to chill down, the sun's gone, there's a little bit of a breeze, I will throw on a jacket in the summer. Mistake me not. That is something that I will do. We still want something that has a little bit of a retention for warmth, which is why the upcycled alpaca blend is so great. So let's pull you guys in for a quick little close-up of the alpaca blend. But this is what she's looking like. Now this is labeled as a number 4 medium or worsted weight fiber, which I feel is correctly classified. My very first impression of this is just how squishy and scrumptious and delicious this feels. A lot of times when I know that a fiber has alpaca in it, I'm kind of on the border, because alpaca can be known to be kind of irritating against your skin, a little bit scratchy, a little bit scruffy, but this bad boy feels like a dream. I feel like I can't recommend this one enough. There is just so much lightweightness, but still squishiness and comfortability with this fiber, and I think this would be a great addition for almost any time of the year. Now I really love having alpaca in this blend because it provides such a lightweight factor. It's actually rather breathable, and it has a little bit of like an insulation, so it is going to keep you comfortably warm. I'm not too sure if my camera is picking it up, but there is a very noticeable halo. It's actually rather fluffy, but believe it or not, it feels like a dream. Like this stuff is very plush. And I think that this would translate so great into a lightweight shawl, a lightweight cardigan, anything kind of meshy. This could also be used really, really well for like a flowy little skirt. The acrylic and the wool is just gonna make this hyper durable. At least when I was kind of swatching it up, it worked up so immaculately. Like guys, I don't think you understand. I had zero issues with this fiber. This yarn will be best used for any type of project that's gonna touch your skin, and I mean like in the slightest. So cardigans, sweaters, scarves, little tank tops, skirts, they're all gonna be really perfectly suited for a fiber like this. And I also wanna shout out like a blanket with this yarn. That baby's gonna be so toasty warm. So yeah, that's the upcycled alpaca blend. It's time for the final swatch test. From the get-go, this yarn is an absolute dream to work with. It's smooth and effortless in the hands, very, very easy to frog and undo your work if you make a mistake. There's absolutely no splitting or any other type of issues that I came across while I was crocheting. I would call this a very unproblematic fiber. Even with a little bit of a halo, the stitches were really easy to see and work into, and I absolutely loved crocheting with it. For me, this is like the perfect go-to like everyday fiber. The alpaca blend provides consistent stitches and is very forgiving. I will say that the texture of this yarn creates an average stitch definition, so we can kind of label this as a Goldilocks yarn. It's not too stiff or too flowy, it's like right in the middle, it's like the sweet spot. As you would imagine, my swatch had a significant 4-way stretch. This bad boy will move in any direction that you need, which is a really good sign that it can be transformed in several different ways depending on your pattern and your hook size. That's gonna go ahead and wrap up today's yarn review. I hope that you guys really enjoyed this. It's a little bit of a different take than I normally do, but I need to put in better effort for you guys, more effort, and hopefully this has inspired you guys to try out some new summer fibers. And if you guys have made it this far into the video, comment a sun emoji, anything with the sun in it, so I know who the real ones are and I know who waited until the very end. I'm really curious to know which fibers of these have spoken to you, and if you guys have tried any of these, please let me know what projects that you made out of them, your own personal opinions. I'd love for just everybody to get a general overview. It's not just about my opinion, okay? We need to kind of ask the fiber community what's going on, what's hot, what's poppin'. Yeah. And with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and close out today's video. I love you all so, so much, and thank you again for being here, and I'll be seeing you all very, very soon. I love you. Bye.